Chapter 5. Ghost in the Machine.
What are you really afraid of? For many people, it generally boils down to the fear of the unknown, but our entire escapade on planet Zebes so far has been directly confronting that fear and overcoming it. Think deeper. What are you really afraid of? Keep this question in mind as we turn our sights eastward in order to explore what our map identifies as the wrecked ship. Utilizing our speed booster, we charged through the blockade to the right of our ship, allowing us to make our way past the east elevator to Brinstar and towards this mysterious spacefaring vessel. Now that Crateria's full circle reveal has had its moment to soak in, the new surface music now continues to play in these eastern caverns, with encouraging trumpets and powerful booming drums motivating us to carry on. Returning to the grapple block-lined ceiling above a deep lake, we now have the ability to swing across, nabbing a missile expansion perched on a tiny post in the center of the lake. From here we have another swing to make to reach the far ledge. However, the grapple blocks above us are different. They appear cracked and brittle, and by spending more than a few seconds swinging from one, the force of our weight destroys the block, plunging us deep into the waters below, where we'll have to bomb our way back through the pipe and climb back up the ravine in order to give it all another go. Since this discovery naturally brought us back to this point, it's a great time to mention that speedrunners actually head this way before ever beating Kraid, by wall jumping up the tall Ripper room in Lower Brinstar, nabbing the power bombs early, and coming straight here, without the grapple beam. Though it's true you can actually make a well-timed running jump to reach these platforms, a more reliable method is by morph ball bomb jumping diagonally by placing perfectly timed bombs in a certain rhythm while moving left and right to inch your way up and to the right. I am admittedly no good at this, but felt that it was interesting enough to mention as possible. You could also get across by first opening the door, using the left side of the previous room to charge speed booster, jump and perform a horizontal shine spark through the door and across the lake, nabbing the missile expansion midway. Though it's tricky, the game is completely open to us testing its limits. Just because I'm leading us along a guided tour, don't forget that at almost any point you could decide to try something clever and explore. However we reach the right platform, we pass through a door exiting the surface cave system and emerge back outside into arguably the biggest room in the game. Not just in terms of physical real estate, but also in depth. We can see the upcoming lake extend far off into the distance as we make our approach on the shoreline. The rocky moss life ends near the shore as a milky gray blue sand washes over the rocks. Protruding from the waters is a golden mechanical structure with engineered supports hoisting it above sea level. Once we make the leap, we can see ahead of us, suspended from similar mechanical golden rafters, are grapple blocks. Swinging onward, we land on yet another structure with another series of blocks hanging from above. After this jump, our next one is a manageable leap, leading to a long gap with nothing but a patrolling Ripper to use as leverage to swing between. It's important to note that as we progressed right, the platforms became more erratically designed, appearing more like crumbling wreckage than a destroyed manufactured bridge. Now, before we pass up something interesting, let's say we fumbled on one of these jumps and accidentally fell down deep into the lake bed. We now have to contend with a new prowling aquatic predator known as a Skullterra. Well, that is if you read the manual for creature names. If you instead go by the game's internal files, the Skullterra is actually known as fish. Yes, just fish. But it looks like anything but. A Skullterra is a tough-plated shark-like piranha with large vertical horns along its head, forming a crest down its spine. I say piranha, but looking at its scale, it more closely resembles a pacu, a colossal Amazonian relative to the piranha. But what makes the Skullterra so dangerous at this moment is that we are still encumbered while navigating water. And interestingly enough, the Skullterra seems to swim by spinning its vertebrae and tail like a corkscrew, holding its head level, and using its dorsal fins for stability. This is a brilliant take on basic evolution that may naturally propagate on an alien planet, but appear bizarrely out of place amongst our own aquatic evolution. Another gentle reminder that every natural bioform we encounter is completely alien to our understanding of terrestrial biology. Another thing to note on the lake bed is even more mechanical structures, confirming that they are the remains of some sort of nearby destruction. In considering we are nearing a wrecked ship, this is likely the sunken flotsam of the vessel. There are also unnaturally high bulbous piles of blue mud in the distance, possibly sediment covering even more castaway debris. The plant life down here is also quite bizarre, growing in tall, thick vertical stalks like cactus. This could actually be more shrapnel from the wreckage covered in thick algae, but we don't see any on the other platforms at all, so this is unlikely. Anyway, as we progress left and make our way back to the shore, we may accidentally shoot open a narrow tunnel underneath the last sunken pedestal. Enticing us inside, we will quickly learn that we cannot morph ball bomb jump underwater, and instead must jump and enter morph ball form to slide through this raised tunnel, leading us to a sunken cavity in the cliff housing a missile expansion. Rolling backward, it's interesting to discover that our morph ball form actually moves considerably faster than running underwater, informing us of a safer strategy to backpedal if we ever have the unfortunate luck of falling into the lake again. You may be asking yourself how players who made it here without the grapple beam would even be able to make these jumps at all. Though another shine spark is an option, a far easier solution is actually to deactivate our high jump boots. Sounds crazy, but it works. Without the high jump boots, we can make simple running jumps across each platform by keeping our head low enough so that it doesn't bump into the low-hanging grapple blocks above. In fact, I can attest that you don't even need to be a pro at the game to completely skip the grapple beam altogether, as I've personally done it myself. So if boiling Crocomire alive didn't sit well with you, then try leaving him alone on your next run for closure and skip the grapple beam entirely. But with all that aside, let's see what's past that ripper. We swing through a narrow opening, landing on a series of 3 more platforms leading to a super missile door. This is the entrance to the wrecked ship, a mysterious vessel that obviously crash-landed here at one point in the past. Before we even enter, our first clue about its origin is the very door itself. Remember way back on the Sarah space colony that doors we encountered on that human vessel were automatic. On Zebes, however, every single door we've seen so far has been different, requiring some sort of specific projectile to activate the unlocking mechanism. Why does this wreckage of an alien ship utilize the same technology? Let's find out. As we enter, we startle away a swarm of bugs from the old machinery rusting with a green copper hue. This long, empty striped tube-like hallway is lined with glass canisters above and below us, each housing a blue biomass. Interestingly enough, we have actually seen something like this before. While storming Mother Brain's facility in Torian during the events of Metroid 1, Samus had to break her way through glass tubes containing an advanced reforming red biomechanical alloy called zebetite. This substance doubled as a regenerative blockade, preventing Samus from gaining ground in the facility, and also as Mother Brain's power source. If the dark and moody atmosphere of the wrecked ship didn't already indicate to you that the power is out, then these dark zebetite tubes should solidify it, as well as strongly imply to whom this vessel belonged. This is a good time to whip out the manual and dig deeper into the lore of the area. All it states about this area reads, quote, "Long ago, astronauts from an ancient civilization crash-landed on Zebes. This is what remains of their ship." We already know that Chozo had manufactured beam doors and zebetite before, and absolutely fit the bill of an ancient civilization. Could this be a Chozo ship? Before we jump to conclusions, let's first address something almost anyone who has beaten Metroid Zero Mission, the Game Boy Advance remake of Metroid 1 for the NES, is likely thinking right now. During what used to be the ending to the original, Zero Mission continues the story where Samus attempts to escape Zebes after defeating Mother Brain, but is shot down by enemy space pirates. With her power suit disabled, Samus then must infiltrate the nearby space pirate mothership. During the events of her escape, the pirate ship is destroyed. Though this ship is known to be docked near the lakes of Crateria, plays a rendition of the wrecked ship theme, and also houses familiar enemies we will soon encounter for ourselves further on that directly originate from Super Metroid, to imply that these are one and the same vessel is a common misconception. The director of both games, Yoshio Sakamoto, has even directly dismissed this claim. However, there is a very small portion of Chozodia that appears to link to the familiar real wrecked ship entrance. Little else shares any similarities to what we've already seen outside of slightly different looking mechanical platforms emerging from a lake, and yet this place still gets commonly referred to as the very same wrecked ship. This was likely a simple Easter egg hidden in the game to intrigue fans of Super Metroid and and nothing more, as the actual structures and layout of the facility aren't even close to the same as Super. Believing that this indeed is the same wrecked ship is also blatantly feigning ignorance to the fact that Samus crash-landed in this place during the events of Metroid Zero mission after lifting off from the planets, flying through the upper atmosphere, and even reaching the vacuum of space, whereupon she is ambushed by space pirates, pursued in a frantic chase, ultimately shot down, and dangerously sent plummeting back through the atmosphere for a crash landing. It would be astronomically unlikely that she could possibly find herself back at the exact spot that she initially lifted off from, if not altogether impossible. But people believe what they want to believe. Granted, Samus is also depicted outside her power suit in Crateria during this cutscene, which we previously speculated might not kill her as she was raised here, assuming the acid rain is no longer falling, which it clearly still is in this cutscene. If this is anything like acid rain on Earth, then she's more likely to suffer acid burns from a can of soda. But this is Zebes, a planet drenched in deadly acids that even erode her high-tech spacesuit. My point is, Zero Mission is a weird game. For the sake of commonality, this is why I primarily focus on the NES original instead of the GBA remake when referencing the original game. I bring this up now and not deeper into the destroyed frigate because this is the end of the commonality between Zero Mission and Super. From here on, it's about to get much darker. Moving forward, we enter the ship proper. It's a cold, lifeless relic. More bugs scatter as we explore each area of the ship, painting the scene as ancient and overtaken by nature. But they aren't all that's still aboard this decaying husk. Seemingly from nowhere, light forms nearby in a globular mass, and out of thin air, a hideous amalgamation of zombified skulls float momentarily as their expressions all share the same morbid, unending torment. After a moment, they dissolve back out of our dimension, and soon reform on top of us, endlessly pursuing Samus for some unknown purpose. These ghastly specters are called Covern. I refer to them in the plural, even though this enemy technically appears one at a time, because they are quite clearly an unfortunate spiritual cocktail of many individual tortured souls contorted into one mass. The Covern make no noise. They phase in and out of reality with no other purpose than to pursue us. Who or what even are the Covern? The Super Metroid Player's Guide states, many moons ago, a strange alien craft crash-landed on the windswept surface of Zebes. Though the ship has lain broken and decaying over the millennia, the spirits of those long-dead travelers still walk its rusting corridors. Yes, the Covern are what remains of the crewmates from this ancient ship, driven mad through the ages of being trapped within these decrepit walls. Are the Covern attempting to abduct and possess Samus's body in hopes of staging a spectral hijacking? They do indeed damage us if they successfully make contact. Is their only hope of escape from this desperate, cruel fate to steal their way back into the world of the living? Can you even imagine the horror of this situation? Of course, the perspective of the Covern is unimaginable as we don't even fully understand their circumstances, but what about Samus? If this truly was a Chozo vessel, then Samus would absolutely recognize it. This ancient ship would certainly predate her upbringing, meaning its ever-stoic presence in Crateria would have been either abandoned in ages past out of fear of what lies within, or more likely, respected as a natural tomb. Either way, Samus would have been directed to stay away from this place, and for good reason. But strangely enough, the wailing skulls of the Covern don't resemble those of a beaked avian Chozo, but instead of humans, molded into a horrid chimeric lump. Were the ancient Chozo friendly with, or otherwise transporting humans? What went wrong? Was this actually a slave ship shot down by an outside party? Were the Chozo covering up something when they abandoned this doomed vessel? What happened here? In a dark, cold, dead, destroyed spaceship, we are haunted by grossly conjoined poltergeists pursuing us at every turn, and the faces of the dead looking back at us are either that of our adoptive family or our biological one. Chozo or human, it makes no difference. Samus Aran is the only person alive who feels the agony of both. Even if she has the stomach to fire upon them out of fear or retaliation, they just keep coming. There seems to be no limit to the indescribable loss of life that happened here upon this ship. Draping this whole scene is a new discomforting musical score. Seemingly random booms and mechanical crunches come from all directions, but just enough of them to make up a consistent rhythm that resonates as an actual theme while also doubling as an atmospheric set piece. Metroid does this trickery with its music just infrequently enough to catch you off guard after you've grown accustomed to the hummable tunes and beats. This music is subconsciously even more unsettling due to its juxtaposition with the rest of the soundtrack. With no alternative, we have to keep moving. Directly across from where we first entered is a save station, but the lights are out. Standing within the dome causes no response, and staying too long we will be pursued by the relentless Covern even in our safe space. Not only can we not save, we are being attacked for even trying. If you don't feel intensely uncomfortable yet, the bowels of this ship will guarantee you won't leave this place without grave uncertainties. Heading back, we shoot the debris in the ceiling to climb up through the wreckage and find another door in the ceiling. Or floor, I guess. We don't exactly know which way was up or down before this ship crash-landed after all. Climbing through, we emerge into a long horizontal corridor with some interesting set pieces. We haven't yet called to attention the visuals in the wrecked ship due to the constant pursuit of the Covern, but here we get some more context clues as to what this ship was for. Inside of large glass domes alternating from the floor and ceiling, we can see strange green balls with yellow spheres orbiting like electrons. With our wave beam, we can actually shoot through the glass and defeat this oddity called an atomic. Whatever the purpose of these oversized atoms held serving the ship is a mystery. Also in the background, we can see more cybernetic wreckage, tubes of inactive zebetite, as well as what appear to be glass windows to containment cells behind which we can see Metroids? Are we seeing this right? It's not a clear view, but there is certainly a green translucent dome with multiple red nuclei inside. The image is distorted like a paused CRT scanline image with heavy interlacing, but through the frozen filters, the image remains uncanny. What else could this possibly be? If there really are Metroids here, then what does that mean? The Chozo were the ones to manufacture the invasive species in the first place, so they wouldn't be out of place on their own spaceship. But what could have been their purpose? They're also not moving. Are they dead? Abandoned husks starved inside their transportation prisons? Even if that's the case, that would mean Ridley's capture of the last living Metroid was redundant if the space pirates knew of this place. There's much more to the story here that we will have to investigate later. The doors on either side of us are locked, so we must head back to the opening shaft of the ship. Dropping down the crumbling stairwell, we pass another inactive door. Bombing on the level below, we will expose a small opening on the left side. Rolling through, we find ourselves in a hidden alcove with occasional spikes on the floor and ceiling, which lead us to a missile expansion at the end. Unless it was placed here later on by some outside intervention, this is undeniable Chozo technology uncovered in this ship. It's very possible you'll miss this hidden room on your way down the opening shaft, but I highly advise picking this expansion up now while you can. You'll see why very soon. Dropping lower still in the main shaft is another deactivated door on our left, so we check our X-ray scope down and to the right, hoping for a path to emerge. Though we can blast away some pipes and wiring below, there's also a small opening in the right corner. Rolling through and bombing out the other side, we pass through an active blue door which lets out into a long canal with rivets in the floor encased by shallow spiked walls. Hopping past the simple hazard, we reach a dead end where X-ray scope indicates 4 vulnerable spots in the far wall, but only the second from the bottom actually leads to a hidden passageway. Problem is, there is a large, bulky cylindrical blockade impeding this path, and it's invulnerable to our weaponry. With no other choice, we turn back. Shooting a clearing in the flooring, we roll through an exposed hidden tunnel to maneuver our way down to a super missile door on the floor. Dropping through, we fall into an even darker, long horizontal room. The mucky lake has eroded the metal of the ship, causing algae and and rust to cloak everything in a dark green film. The closer structures in the background seem to be eroding away entirely, as a parallaxing effect creates an impressive illusion of depth. To our left, we startle away some bugs from an askew tin can in the corner. Just beyond it is a blue door, which unfortunately leads us into an inactive map room. There is no response from the machine, and once again, the only life in the room is the small swarm of bugs we startle upon entry. Heading back, we leap past another set of bugs on an abandoned cylinder, beyond which we notice a suspicious opening in the bottom right wall. Rolling inside the decimated wiring, we drop a bomb in a structural weak point and emerge right in front of a Ghidorah. This small room is completely encased in the Ghidorah's crusty gray biomass. With nowhere to hide, we must quickly confront the dangerous blockade just as we had previously. The last time we encountered a Ghidorah, it was locking off the door to the space pirate commander, Kraid. They are likely unnatural life forms placed as seals protecting high-ranking space pirate elites, but we saw no evidence of space pirate presence at all so far on this ship. What is this thing protecting deep in this ship's sunken caverns past a nearly inaccessible crawl space? After dealing with the threat, we pass through and fall into a small dark room as familiar suspenseful music begins. Floating blue balls of fire are lit in a counterclockwise circle. Once the ring is complete, they swirl into a center point as the image of a golden creature is revealed through waving ripples. The music once again shifts into the unorthodox boss theme we heard from Kraid and Crocomire. The specter floats around in the room, semi-transparent, dropping bouncing blue flames as it moves. The flames can be shot and destroyed for pickups, but the creature itself is completely invulnerable. Eventually, it opens its huge singular eye while launching blue fire in all directions. During this small period of time, the eyeball turns to look straight at Samus. Taking advantage of the moment, we fire our strongest weaponry at the eye, causing the creature to wail in pain and quickly fizzle away. This dimension-hopping poltergeist is known as Phantoon. This cowardly menace attempts to contain and exterminate Samus in this small confinement by hurling globs of blue plasma in various erratic waves and patterns, while taking advantage of its incorporeal nature, ensuring that this fight is almost entirely one-sided. Phantoon tightly shuts its eye throughout the flaming onslaught, only taking the risk of peeking out at Samus for a fraction of a second, or during a particularly distracting attack. These are the only chances we have at harming the monster. Its eye is encased in a red carrion mass, surrounded by what appears to be teeth in a large maw rather than eyelids. This flash of red is our indicator to strike, much like Crocomire's bright yellow tongue. Spikes form a crest around its back, leaving two tentacles to dangle at its sides. Below the eye is a ribbed, bony structure, bottoming out into a row of teeth. You wouldn't be remiss to mistake it for the top of a jaw, as the head of the creature is a large skull-like dome with two clear hemispheres. Phantoon's design itself messes with your perception, skirting between human pareidolia and deep-sea monstrosities as it wobbles between dimensions. The idea that Phantoon is somehow the head or skull of some greater force would later be confirmed, of all places, in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, where Phantoon's trophy can be obtained with its art and lore referencing its eventual return on the Nintendo Wii's Metroid Other M. It states that the mysterious ethereal creature can only materialize its head in the physical world. Its true form is said to be that of a giant. Whatever Phantoon really is, it's huge. This really is just the head of a massive interdimensional creature phasing in and out of our known universe, and we're trapped in a room with it. To make matters even more nerve-wracking, we haven't had the opportunity to save since we passed our ship at the beginning of this chapter. If we are defeated here, that means we must start this journey to the wrecked ship all over again. The pressure is on. Personally, this boss is the most intimidating in the entire game for me, and it's not just because of the prospect of losing time, it's because Phantoon's openings are sometimes outrageously small. After taking a hit from a super missile, Phantoon will rise to the center of the room and blast spinning waves of fire, alternating left to right, all the while tightly shutting its eye. Though you can predict these attacks and spin jump into the top right and left corners to avoid it, it's far simpler to exploit exploit your invincibility frames with a pseudo screw attack by spin jumping with a full charge beam. But if you're not ready for it, Phantoon will peek his eye out for mere frames during the final sweep of his fire. Being patient, Phantoon will eventually get cocky and resort to much easier patterns you can exploit, like raining fire from above, all while watching Samus with its eye exposed. Phantoon reacts differently based on what you used to damage him last. More damage results in more dangerous patterns. This is a rare instance of a charge beam combo being particularly useful in combat. The Wave Beam's asteroid belt technique is particularly helpful in clearing the blue flames and possibly swiping Phantoon in the process. My best recommendation is don't panic. Only keep your missiles at the ready when you know Phantoon is about to appear. Clear the room of flames by rapid firing your beams and restocking with the dropped pickups. Phantoon can be killed with a mere 5 super missiles, but that also means dodging 5 waves of his sweeping fire attack. In theme with lore, you'll likely end up missing over half of your shots due to Phantoon's ethereal nature, or due to the erratically moving flames blocking your shots. Also, don't feel bad for missing some of those impossibly small windows to hit Phantoon's eye. They come inhumanly fast just to get in your head that you're losing and missing your opportunities, and they're not honestly intended for you to be able to hit. Interestingly enough, while invisible, you can actually spy where Phantoon is hiding through the use of the X-ray scope, though this won't exactly do you any favors. Once Phantoon shifts from gold to a deep blood orange, one final strike will cause the monstrosity to fade in and out while staring at Samus intensely. Explosions erupt all over the creature as it unflinchingly stares right through us. Suddenly, strong waves of distortion rip the spirit away, similarly to how it first appeared. The room is illuminated, pickups appear above our head, and the boss music has now become the item room theme. Now that we have a moment to breathe, it's time to ask the burning question. What the heck was that? For one, we were thrown into the area's boss fight at the get-go, an already unusual choice made all the more intimidating by the broken save station above. But what exactly was Phantoon? The manual states that Phantoon is the ghost of the ship, tapping into Mother Brain's brainwaves. Clearly, we can now see that it was also leeching onto this ship in order to suck away its energy. But this ship is centuries old. How is it still functional after all this time? There must be a secret to the Chozo's energy utilization we've not yet discovered. That aside, we wouldn't get additional clarity on what Phantoon even was until Metroid Other M. In an unlockable image of concept art depicting the new and original designs for the boss, some untranslated Japanese text has some huge lore implications for Super Metroid. It loosely claims that Phantoon was an interdimensional stowaway on the Chozo ship, and was the cause of the crash landing that inadvertently brought the Chozo to Zebes. Aside from this confirming the origin of the ship, more interestingly, it claims that Phantoon didn't arrive upon the scene afterwards to absorb its power. It was there from the very beginning. In fact, this implies that Phantoon was the very source of the chain of events that would make the entire series come to pass. The Chozo colonized Zebes after this crash millennia ago. After a space pirate attack on Samus's home planet K2L, they would rescue her and bring her back to Zebes in order to adopt the orphan. During their stay, they develop Mother Brain in order to control their newly conceived Bioforce Metroids. Eventually, the space pirates would attack Zebes, recruit Mother Brain, and be bested by Samus herself as the Chozo are believed to be extinct. After many of Samus's space bounty hunting missions, she is eventually led back here to the site of this crash-landed Chozo ship, face to face with the very incorporeal menace that had been lying inside, dormant all this time. Did the Chozo fear invoking Phantoon's wrath so much that they'd abandon their own dead to succumb to its eternal malice? It is an unknowable interdimensional force capable of absorbing and redirecting the entire ship's fuel supply directly into itself. It also weaponized the deceased crewmates of the vessel in the form of the Covern. We know this because as we exit this room and return to the Power Direct ship, we will no longer encounter a single Covern for the rest of the game. Whatever they were, we can only hope that they are finally at rest. The music in the ship is also now a wobbling pulse, overlaid on top of a new rendition of the original Haunted theme. The same rhythm and melody is present, but is now rendered with various energized machines. It's really clever how it transforms this space from dead to alive, while simultaneously retaining the seemingly random horror effects for a new deliberate callback. Above the hidden tunnel that led us to the Ghidorah, we can see some exposed wiring short-circuiting and spraying green sparks. It would be wise to give any similar wires a wide berth to avoid accidental electrocution. Rolling through the tunnel, we are reintroduced to the transformed space with two new hazards right in our face. From above, a freed atomic slowly approaches with uncomfortably smooth tracking. Though they pose no long-range threat, the atomics will pursue Samus relentlessly until they're taken down. They can even phase through walls and platforms as they're drawn to Samus like magnetism. Atomics do have some hefty defenses as well, so they must either be avoided or taken down one at a time to progress safely through the wrecked ship from here on out. The second hazard, if you can even call it that, is the previously inanimate cylinder, now fumbling around on its own two bipedal feet. This silly mecha doofus is called a work robot. Obviously it's a robot, but as to what work this limbless walking trash can could accomplish is something I'm not even prepared to speculate on. The work robots have suddenly gone haywire with the return of power to the ship, occasionally firing a spherical beam our way. Since they don't have any visible connection to the ship's power, their fuel source must be received via some sort of transmission. This highly advanced walking tube does nothing but wander around back and forth, accomplishing nothing but getting in our way. It's hilarious. The work robot also closely resembles the GNK power droid from Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, which was also a comically pointless walking box with legs. If Star Wars is indeed the source of inspiration, then it's possible these machines are intended to be walking power generators like in Star Wars. If that's indeed the case, they sure failed in their directive quite catastrophically, with Phantoon hijacking the ship's main power and performing no intercepting function to power the vessel and prevent the entire ship from crash landing. Instead, they are likely a simple reference to early sci-fi robots where actors would put on a bulky costume and meander around the set for ambiance, or to fill a critical role as another similar robot does in the 1960s television series Lost in Space. To make matters even stranger still, the manual can be quoted as saying, "These robots were built by ancient man to service the inside of the ship." The work robots were actually a human-manufactured product, assuming that it's inaccurate to refer to the Chozo as man. This would explain how we can also later see them on a space pirate vessel in Metroid Zero mission. If these human-made robots were enlisted on a Chozo ship, it's not outside the range of possibility that there were also humans aboard this ship as well, meaning that the Covern might very well have been ghastly human remains haunting their own graves. But enough about these big stupid robots, let's check out the newly activated map station to finally get a good look at the layout of this place. From what we can gather, the wrecked ship is quite small, as we've already explored about half of it. Heading back up, we can now open the door on our left, which our map revealed to be a small enclosure holding an item. But once we're inside, we see many fraying electrical wires, complicating what would ordinarily have been a simple grab. Being careful to avoid electrocution, we can grab a super missile expansion before heading back. Remembering to bomb the far right corner, we can re-enter the following room to discover the blue-plated floor is actually a moving conveyor belt, making the spikes on the sides of each particularly dangerous. But more importantly, we're being charged by a new floating enemy called a bull. These spherical floating plant-like creatures have several protruding fungal tubes sticking out of them in random directions, and like an earth bull, will charge and ram us with its body. That is where the similarities end though. There seems to be no form of sentience to these creatures, and they appear to only operate by converting the air around them into a noxious gas used as propellant. The broken glass domes above our heads are also now dropping electrical green sparks, making this room far more hectic than before. Passing a work robot stumbling about each of the two non-moving platforms, we can now powerbomb our way past the far wall now that the robot has moseyed out of the way. Inside, we collect a hidden super missile expansion nestled between two large, undamaged glass Wait a second. These glass domes are now fully operational and were left undamaged from the crash and the violent resurgence of power which released the atomics. Instead of the expected atomics, inside each dome are 3 nuclei with what look like nerves rooting through the encased glass housing. These devices look astoundingly like Metroids. Though these are clearly not the same creatures and possibly not even creatures at all, these domes were placed all around the facility and are attached with industrial means to ensure they served some sort of purpose for the atomics and also for these synthetic faux Metroids. Since we know the Chozo manufactured the biological Metroids, there's no reason to assume that the ancient Chozo hadn't manufactured early prototypes of the species, perfected their craft, and utilized their creation to control power in their massive spacefaring vessels. Metroids are natural energy displacement devices after all. The nuclei branches appear to be made of the same material as the ship's zebbatite, possibly implying that whatever makes up this odd element is also the source of the Metroid's energy manipulating abilities. Were ancient Metroids inorganic, immobile power supplies and only later repurposed into biological weapons? The Metroids we know and fear are energy-sucking monsters, but these Chozo-designed power conduits are energy-supplying benevolent machines. Were the other domes broken into by outside forces trying to get their hands on this technology? Or did the others simply burst from the release of Phantoon's energy, leaving these 2 stronger devices intact? Were the space pirates already looking into this ship's lost technology, hoping it would shed light on their research for extraplanetary conquest? If so, it would explain why the pirates continued to study as many specimens as they could find, disappointed by the vast differences in engineering that separate these supposed superconductors and living biological Metroids, leading their desperation to abduct the last living specimen in hopes of reverse engineering the creature and birthing an army of subordinate clones. But we're getting ahead of ourselves speculating with so little evidence, regardless of how compelling and disturbing the evidence really is. If I were Samus discovering this possibility at this very moment, then I'd be feeling instantly validated for not exterminating the entire race, and instead transporting the last living Metroid to the Galactic Research Station in hopes of engineering a way to use the species for good instead of malice. At least it appears possible that the progenitor to Metroid biotech began with a beneficial, harmless device. Imagine the good just a single one of these generators could provide to a hospital, assuming that the galaxy isn't completely terrified at the thought of keeping anything even resembling a Metroid in a hospital, regardless of its utility and resourcefulness. Now more than ever, we must find and secure the last Metroid to even humor the thought. Backtracking up the opening shaft of the ship, we can re-enter the room we previously bombed our way into where we grabbed a missile expansion. Now the conveyor belts are moving into the spike hazards, and not only that, there are spiked platforms that drop from the ceiling in order to crush us that slowly rise back up before dropping again. This hazard is called a Zon, and whether or not it's biological in any way like a tripper, it's unmistakably deadly. The Zon even rises back up into another set of spikes to ensure that you don't even try jumping between them to avoid the other hazards. The bottom spikes of the Zon are also lined with what looks like fresh red blood. Though age-restricted content was yet to be formally established, it was shocking to see Nintendo add such a morbid detail to one of their games in the 90s. This deliberate placement of blood calls to mind an important scene in the Disney Pixar film Finding Nemo, where Dory is hit in the face hard enough to bleed a small amount. It wasn't something that could be helped or censored, as it was used as a plot contrivance to get the nearby shark to lose its composure and chase the protagonists. Is this use of blood as mandatory as what Disney, of all companies, okayed in Finding Nemo? Absolutely not. And that's what makes its appearance all the more shocking. It's unnecessary. Anyway, if you didn't realize it by now, this corridor has been made drastically more dangerous with the return of the ship's power. If you didn't grab the missile expansion at the end of the hall before Phantoon, then you have my condolences. Climbing back up, we can now open another new door on the right. Inside, we are rushed by a bull over a pit of water. Beyond is a tall ledge that we can't reach due to the water weighing us down. Though we could cheese our way up by wall kicking, I would highly advise against it. I'll tell you right now that without the proper gear, the next room is a death trap, and we will have to return here later. Moving up higher still in the main room, we can finally utilize the activated save station. Reaching this save station station after its activation is such an indescribable relief, as we can now affirm that Phantoon has indeed been defeated. It's also interesting to note, with our knowledge of the wrecked ship, that we've also been seeing glass domes in other parts of Zebes, notably in save and map rooms, likely modernized renditions of ancient Chozo technology. If we return to the room across the way, the entrance to the ship, we will see the Zebetite has all lit up and activated, but unlike the Zebetite we saw in Metroid 1, these are green, like the odd Metroid-like generators. Does this imply that Metroids are actually housing orbs of Zebetite in order to process vast quantities of energy? More confusingly, why is something named Zebetite found on a ship that only discovered this planet by crashing into it? These are probably an earlier rendition of the biomaterial going by another name, but it's still kind of funny. Anyway, this room is now a weird cylindrical conveyor tube through the ship's power supply. Strange. Moving back up, we can now make our way to the very top of the ship through the door in the ceiling. Before we can even get our bearings, we are flanked by two wingless albino pearl Kai hunters. These are unmistakable space pirates aboard the ship, and they weren't here previously, or if they were hidden out of sight. Aside from the two flightless pearl Kai hunters, there are several airborne ones patrolling the area, alongside the released atomics. For the record, this subspecies of Kai hunter isn't called albino or pearl or anything other than Kai hunter. I'm just calling them pearl for clarity. They also have increased HP, so whatever it is that makes this offshoot so colorless must also be affecting their robust vitality. Once again, there are some immediate noticeable differences in this room after regaining power. The glass atomic domes are all sparking, making the room quite hazardous. The doors on either side of us are both locked until all enemies have been eliminated, which requires sweeping the long room before choosing a direction, making accidental electrical damage almost guaranteed. The screens or windows in the background we think might be showing Metroids are now animated as they flip between two distorted frames like a malfunctioning radio TV. If these are indeed electrical screens, then it sure is bizarre that when the power was off, we saw a frozen frame and not a black screen. Whatever is back there has just left me more confused. Speaking of peculiar, there are tall tubes running from floor to ceiling supporting the structure with Zebetite containers in the middle. However, unlike all of the others we saw in the entrance to the ship, these aren't powering back on at all. Clearly, this portion of the ship has been commandeered by space pirates. It's not at all surprising to see evidence of them tampering with or reverse engineering Chozo technology inside its walls. With the enemies eliminated, it would be wise to head to the right first, as our map indicated an item at the end of that hall. Inside, we must avoid falling sparks, conveyors leading to spikes in sudden pits, and work robots aimlessly ambling about the remaining space. The ceiling is lowered in enough places that we must shoot the work robots in our way. They don't take damage, but they do fumble away from any concussive blasts. One robot stuck in a spike pit allows us to use it as a platform to cross, and with another robot in our path, it becomes clear that we must shoot the bucket of bolts into the upcoming pit in order to cross. Hopefully these things don't possess any higher intelligence, or we've just intentionally doomed them to an eternity of standing in a spiky, form-fitting prison akin to an Iron Maiden. Just after it is another robot in our path near another spike pit. But never mind their potential misfortune, there's a missile expansion at the end of the room. Their eternal misery has been justified by our appropriation of 10 missiles. Back in the past room, we have to once again clear it of all of its enemies before the doors will unlock, allowing us to exit to the left. This leads back outside to the surface of Crateria, but much higher in the sky. There is a series of floating, rocky, moss-covered platforms we can use as step stools, and hopping between them, we will eventually come across a flying tripper. If we take this as a hint, we can jump aboard and notice that this one doesn't sink from our weight. Patiently waiting will reward us with another higher tripper coming within sight. Jumping aboard it, we can ride until yet another tripper can be seen high in the sky. If we make it to this one and watch its path, it will butt up against a rocky cliff face at the very top of our map. The X-ray scope at this moment will handily freeze time so we can prepare for what's about to happen. Lodged in the left cliffside straight ahead of us is a hidden missile expansion, but it's in a dangerously high place, and our tripper friend isn't about to wait for us to grab it. Quickly, we must fire a beam to expose the missile and spin jump to grab it. Alternatively, we can jump in, enter Morph Ball, and try to slide into the hole. Either way, we can't grab it if we're upright, so we must ensure that we don't fumble and fall all the way down. The tripper will force us to make a quick move as it actually flies behind behind the rock face, eliminating its use as a platform, instigating us to think fast and discover this tediously hidden goodie. Falling down, we will find ourselves trying to find another way back into the wrecked ship, as we can spy some hidden rooms below us and to the right where we exited. Following the structures will lead us to a blue door which takes us back inside. Here in a room adorned with thick tendrils of knotted cables above and below, we are given a long conveyor belt to build speed booster and crash through 3 walls of blockades and up a small flight of stairs, grinding to a halt at the top. Directly below us is a room housing an item sphere we missed in the ship somewhere. Pulling out the X-ray scope, we can investigate the scene, only to discover that there is no way for us to escape our confinement. All we can infer is that there is a hidden pit in front of the item, which is revealed to be a reserve tank. Past it are 2 pitfall blocks above its enclosure and a speed booster block just past them. From this, we can deduce that we will need to shine spark up that far shaft, fall through the blocks, and finally avoid the hidden trap in order to grab the item. Though we're leaving this room empty-handed, we take comfort in knowing we leave it better informed than when we first entered. Naturally, this leads us back outside, hugging the ground below us, looking for another way down. And we don't see anything out of the ordinary if we don't investigate further with morph ball bombs or the X-ray scope. Bombing around the far left part of the cliff reveals a super missile block in the rocks below. Shooting it and dropping through, we fall into a small hidden passageway and land in a tiny Z-shaped opening in the rock. We can now see that there is a missile expansion lodged in the rock to the left, and if we are foolish enough to excitedly roll around in morph ball form hoping to naturally find the way over there, then we are in for a shock. Rolling down the Z-shape will drop us into another hole where a single pitfall block cracks from our weight, sending us careening down through the cave ceiling and all the way back to the rocky shore by the entrance to the wreckage. If this happens to you, as it did me on my first time, you'll have no other choice than to loop all the way back around to give this another try. This time, let's use our X-ray scope to survey the area. From here, we can spot a weakness in the top left rock, allowing us passage to the expansion. However, the only safe way back is through the same tunnel, meaning we will have to jump and enter morph ball to slide through on the return trip. The alternative would be to bomb the lower part of the wall and fall for the same pitfall block trick again. Hopefully your instincts at this point in the game would be to investigate first and execute second. Your punishment for acting with sloppy haste is a long runaround where you're only left with remorse for your own mistakes. But we're better than that, right? Jumping back through the opening, we find that the super missile block has reformed. If we ran out entering, then we've just doomed ourselves to fall below. Anyway, now that we've seen the cliff channel system, we know that there is another opening somewhere to the right. Just past a clump of moss is a bombable block that drops us into another opening in the rock. If we happen to discover this channel first, then we'd likely try to work our way to the left. Bombing past another block, we find ourselves stuck with no way to progress, and the X-ray scope shows us that there are actually 3 bombable rocks in this small cave, but none lead anywhere. Instead, these tease us with the prospect of reaching the left channels housing the missile expansion. Heading back into the right, we roll through the opening to reach a new blue door past a zeb nest in the foliage. Inside the following corridor, we deal with 3 incoming waivers and a series of new enemies called choots. Choots are basically leaping parachute pancakes with teeth. These bizarre creatures actually originate from another planet entirely, SR388 from Metroid 2. Though they had a slightly different English name, it was also pronounced choot, and its Japanese names are both identical, implying that these really are the same creatures. Maybe these leaping flapjacks hitched a ride on Chozo's ships to make the journey between planets. Though they aren't much of a threat, their unusual movement can throw you off. Choots leap high into the air when we approach them, and then expand their maw like a parachute to gently glide back and forth down to the ground and leap again. This is a dog chasing a car situation, where I'm not entirely sure what the Choot's plan is, if and when it actually catches anything. The real lesson of this room is that zigzagging enemies in tight spaces with pools of water can turn otherwise weak enemies into real threats. The next room is a small outdoor overpass through the cave connecting back to the ship. Above us, we can spy a new green-spiked orange Geemer. This unusual creature was nowhere to be seen when we were above this bridge, and now appears above the ceiling in this one tiny crossway. Unlike any other Geemer in the game, this one follows Samus's X position as she moves. This, alongside its variosuit coloration, has earned it the nickname Samus Geemer, which makes me imagine this little guy is mimicking Samus and having his own little space adventure in our wake. Internally, the creature is named an H-Zoomer. I should mention that Zoomer was the Geemer's original name in Metroid 1, 1, but it was more accurately translated to Gamer in Super. The internal files, however, still retain the original translation name, and ironically, most games will from this point on, making Gamer the odd name out. The H in its name, however, could stand for horizontal or homing to set apart this unique Gamer from the rest, as we will never see another instance of it for the rest of the game. He's on his own quest to face his nemesis, so let's leave the little guy to it. Or if you're not into studying xenoentomology, you could also just shoot it with the wave beam, even though it can't possibly hurt you. Entering the ship proper, the door locks behind us in a dangerous room devoid of platforms. Below is an unending series of spikes, and above is a line of grapple blocks. Whatever is out there must be worth it, as we are now hearing the item room theme. As we swing, we see that there are gaps in the ceiling between grappling shots, demanding we be deliberate with our swings. Some are also the weaker crumbling grapple blocks, meaning we can't just swing and wait for the perfect moment. The spikes below are also different on the wrecked ship than anywhere else. Instead of gray metallic teeth, these spikes resemble large scattered shrapnel from wreckage. At the end of the line, we find ourselves on a small ledge with a large standing Chozo statue with its back against the wall and its arms cusped together as if it were holding something. There's your definitive in-game guarantee that this was a Chozo ship. But did something steal the item it was holding? What do we do here? Remember, we are locked in the room until we can figure it out. Befuddled at this peculiar dead end, we might be inclined to do something a little strange. By climbing up and into the Chozo's hands and entering Morph Ball, allowing it to cradle us like an item orb, the statue comes to life. The arms sink from the weight, the eyes glow and seem to blink slowly back to life. Its grip tightens, preventing us from rolling away. The statue then suddenly begins stomping forward, down the stairs and through the spikes, crushing them along its way. After about halfway through the room, it starts descending through spikes into a hidden stairwell, leading us into a new room beneath the floor with a blue door right ahead of us. It stops in place, releases its grip, and we drop down into the ground right on top of some pitfall blocks right in front of the door. Though you may be tempted to immediately go through it, we were clued into another room behind us on the descent, and those otherwise unnecessary pitfall blocks were placed underneath us to further hint at this possibility. Dropping a bomb right where we fell opens a new hidden tunnel through the wires beneath our feet, running backwards through a ribbed pipe. At its end, we bomb again, allowing us room to stand. From here, we shoot up and around to carve out an opening up and to the right. Jumping up to it, we drop another bomb to reach the other side, and by doing so, reveal speed booster blocks along the path. Just past this is a couple of work robots patrolling a narrow hallway, which fall into perfectly sized spiked traps in the floor with a little push, lining up their heads flush with the ground. Behind them is a Chozo statue holding a missile expansion. It's nice, but a little odd that all a Chozo statue was holding was our most inconsequential of upgrades. And there isn't enough room to build the speed booster that we know is possible in this room, even with the work robots filling in the gaps on the floor. Greedily suspecting more, we X-ray scope the area and find that the entire statue and following wall are destructible by power bomb. Blasting away an opening, we see the work robots truly are indestructible as they survive the blast completely unscathed. Past the opening we just made is a fast conveyor belt running against us, encouraging us to run full force. By charging speed booster and shine sparking up against the wall, we rocket into a tall shaft and through the speed booster block in the ceiling, landing us right next to the energy reserve tank we spied earlier. Remembering the layout, we drop through the pitfall blocks and leap safely across the false floor to grab the goodie. Now falling through the hole, we drop through several pitfall blocks and narrowly avoid some spikes on the walls. There were also some spikes placed in the vertical shaft we used to shine spark up. These were here to prevent us from trying to wall kick the way up, since we'd only be disappointed by a block locking us below. This is one of the few puzzles that actually requires knowledge of shine sparking. Now with that little diversion out of the way, we can speed booster back and crash through the left wall and roll back to the blue door the Chozo statue dropped us in front of. Once again, we are lucky the pitfall blocks did not reform, as they would accidentally trap us below. It may all feel organic, but this game is meticulously designed to give us that impression. Through the door, we enter a small room housing a solitary item orb, possibly belonging to the empty-handed statue. The room has 4 unusual green devices around its electrical green zebetite center, all surrounding this upgrade. Shooting it, we acquire the gravity suit. Samus faces forward as a violet flash of light envelops the screen, and her suit transforms into a new purple hue. For the first time in the series, Samus now has a new ultimate suit, further increasing her defenses to 70 35%, or if you'd like to think of it this way, damage is reduced by another half. The gravity suit would later return in nearly all Metroid games to date, and often as Samus's final suit upgrade. But what does it do? Restoring power to the ship and acquiring its latent treasure was imperative to our mission, as we will instantly realize once we exit through the next door, dropping us without warning back outside, deep down into the Craterian Lake. This is an amazing moment. Right away you feel the fear of being preemptively pushed from the nest, but landing in water of all places instigates the realization that the gravity suit completely negates the water's friction. No longer held back by the weight of the sea, we can zip around the lake bed as fast as ever, easily defeating the Skullterras that previously gave us trouble. Though it might more accurately be named the friction suit, the gravity suit is an astounding piece of Chozo technology. The immediate surrounding space enveloping Samus is shielded with an imperceptible force field, causing hazardous elements like water and lava to fall away from the suit by the use of controlled personal gravity. Just imagine being able to dash through the ocean floor where the water is instantly repelled by your skin fast enough to provide completely free movement. This is incredible, and we only discovered we had this ability by the game intentionally dropping us into this lake. Now that's cool. From here you can now easily grab the missile expansion tucked away beneath the left shore if you missed it earlier. And before we head back inside the wrecked ship once again, let's do a quick item roundup with our new suit. Though there isn't much more to grab, we can actually 100% finish looting Brinstar. If we backtrack down the elevator that brought us to the morph ball in the very beginning, we can now head to the right to a dead-end wall past where the energy tank was lodged in the ceiling. By power bombing through, we open a tall vertical hidden shaft. It's too high to jump, so instead we build up a speed booster and shine spark. We want to aim for the black missing rock tile. It's an indicator of where this hidden path lies. Launching all the way up, we blast through a block in the ceiling, landing in a small room with two more menacing heads perched on poles, framing the exit we just took. Do be careful, as this block we crash through will not reform beneath us, catching us from falling back down. Passing the door on our left, we drop into a flooded chamber with no clear platforms and nothing but spikes ahead of us underwater. Checking it out with X-ray scope, we can spy an invisible ledge floating high in the room. Utilizing our ability to jump unhindered in water, we leap high above the water level and land on the secret bridge. But we better move fast, as boulders begin to fall from the ceiling as we pass, knocking into the invisible bridge before crashing into the waters below. On the other side, we pass through a blue door leading to a solitary missile expansion in a small metal room. If this seems disappointing for such an involved series of traps and checks, then try looking around with your X-ray scope, and you will find a bonus missile expansion hidden in the pedestal's far left brick. That's it for this room, so we backtrack through the boulder room and down the long shaft. If you happen to use your last power bomb opening this path and start freaking out thinking you just locked yourself inside as the wall reformed beneath us, take comfort in knowing that the designers thought of absolutely everything. If we try jumping to the right while in the sealed chamber, we will break a single pitfall block, exposing a small one-way exit from the Tower of Rock. Genius. Now, if we return to the Chozo statue that gifted us the charge beam west of here, we can now powerbomb the block beneath its pedestal, opening up a hidden channel under the statue, exiting into a steep, slimy ravine, bottoming out in front of a red door. Inside, we once again drop into water, but this time in a long, flooded nest of pink slime and molting zeros. Defeating them as we move along, we will reach a wall the X-ray scope reveals to be made up of speed booster blocks. What would otherwise be impossible without the gravity suit, we dash through the water and destroy 3 separate walls of moldy pink slime to reach an energy tank hoisted above water level at the end of the tunnel. And that was Brinstar in its entirety. There are more things to do with the gravity suit, but they each lead down a critical path, so instead let's make one last pit stop before heading back to the wrecked ship. If we take this opportunity to check up on the golden statue room, the center statue's yellow eye flashes and shatters, and just like Kraid's, a spirit can be seen quickly fleeing the monument as it slowly fades to gray. It's now obvious that the center statue was Phantoon, and there are absolutely other spirits trapped in this morbid locking mechanism. Were the space pirates intentionally exploiting the trapped souls of the wrecked ship into fulfilling some sort of of undead function in their research? The Covern were clearly utilized as defensive weapons, and these similarly trapped spirits are being enslaved inside of a golden prison, unable to escape until their associated voodoo dolls have been slain. Little touches like this add a whole new level of complexity and mystery to another alien race's science and technology. Another thing this statue just confirmed is Phantoon's affiliation with the space pirates. Unmistakably, this giant interdimensional cephalopod was tied to a secret space pirate device that activated with its passing just as it did for Kraid's. Phantoon's actions that set this entire series into motion weren't simply those of an other-dimensional being exploiting the energy reserves of a neighboring universe. Phantoon was allied with the barbarous, tyrannical monsters that threatened peace in the entire galaxy from the very beginning. It killed the Chozo pioneers that brought the species to this planet. It sat in waiting for millennia, drunk on the fuel reserves of the ship it downed, using its own crewmates as protection. It sat there all this time, right next to Samus and the Chozo, tapping into the innocently developed mother brain, corrupting it from its very inception, and dooming the Chozo for simply existing too near its proximity. This monster is solely responsible for instigating the death and destruction running rampant in the galaxy, and it all happened right here in Samus's backyard. Now I ask you all again, what are you really afraid of? The unknowable future always holds the potential for misery and horror, but what if the real terror was behind you, and you never even realized it was there? A malignant tumor growing inside of you for years undiagnosed. A close companion hiding skeletons in their closet or lying about you behind your back. A new study revealing the way you've been preparing your meals for decades is a leading cause for infertility or an incurable disease. A deceitful neighbor setting you up for becoming wrongfully convicted of their secret serial killing spree. Your childhood home appears on the news while a SWAT team raids it as a meth lab. The very place you grew up, your entire adoptive family, everything you know in your entire life has had a malicious puppeteer pulling the strings, leading you down an inevitable path of ruin, and you're only realizing it all right now after it's far too late. What are you really afraid of? Maybe the ultimate tragedy we fear doesn't come from the unknowable future. It's the evil lying in plain sight that we're unable to face, permeating our past and corrupting our entire lives. Seeing Phantoon here at this very moment, putting all the pieces together, it's a wonder Samus doesn't crumple to the floor in tears. Her only comfort comes in knowing that at the very least, two of these high-ranking space pirate rogues are dead, and spitting on their graves won't bring back the insurmountable loss of life that resulted from their tyranny. So with that, we turn our attention back to the wrecked ship in hopes of hunting down the final two beasts. Below the ship's save station, we can now easily pass the charging bull and leap from the water to reach a new door, behind which is one of the deadliest places imaginable. Spikes almost entirely line the floor and ceiling, with 5 Zons raising and slamming down their spikes into the openings in the floor. On top of this, the room is filled shoulder deep with water. Each Zon moves in sync with the next, so if you're running out of room while standing on one, there's practically no safe alternative other than to dive underneath the next one and hope you can progress to the next rung of spikes. This room is difficult enough with the gravity suit, and it is a bloody nightmare without. I certainly hope you've saved recently. After braving the horrific Zon trap room, we climb out of the water and scale the room by blasting away the weak points in the ceiling, indicated by the cracked tubes. 2 rungs up, we pass a blue door on the right, but continued shooting reveals that there is more to this room. The middle of the ceiling can be shot and leapt through, leading up and around to a new red door. On the other side, we look out across a huge flooded expanse. Checking down in the Skullterra-infested waters, we find some scattered floating platforms to help us climb out of what looks like an endless line of spiky shrapnel. Climbing back up, we can now see that we must swing between the crumbling grapple blocks and hop across the sinking suspensor platforms to pass. If we somehow made it this far without the gravity suit, God help you, as the suspensor platforms duck down into the water, making these jumps practically impossible without it. After a few platform jumps and a final crumbling swing, we land in front of another standing Chozo statue, this time holding an appreciated energy tank. And with that acquisition, we have just 100%ed the wrecked ship. It wasn't a large area, but it was packed with interesting, obtuse design and fascinating lore implications. Heading back to the first door we passed on the right, we step through and exit onto the other side of Crateria. We descend the discarded flotsam into the chilly Craterian lake. Many chutes and Skullterra make this side of the lake their home. Avoiding them, we can make use of the suspensor platforms floating in the water, while ducking under the low-hanging stalactite. At one point, we will be forced underwater by the low ceiling, and if that wasn't enough of a gravity suit check, the final jump up the right cliff face demands that you do not pass without the ability to move freely in liquids, with a high jump out of the blue swamp below. Past the door, we drop down through a zigzagging cave system which extends far into the distance behind us. On our way, 2 cargo hives will attempt to fill the cavern with tiny insects if we don't urgently eliminate them. At the bottom, we drop down through a blue door and into one of the most perplexing rooms in the game. We are in another large cavity in the cave system, but this time there are many small winding rocky formations complicating our spelunking. You'd be wise to try your X-ray scope all over in here, instead of just hoping to stumble upon the solution. To our left are a series of pitfall blocks arranged in such a way that only allow us to fall back onto this side of the rocks from the opposite direction. Down in the waters below, we must roll through some tight channels and defeat a scissor or two before emerging on the other side. In front of us, our X-ray scope reveals a weakness in the upcoming tunnel, leading to a hidden cavity and pitfall block, dropping us on the other side. Assuming we didn't see that strange option and instead kept exploring upwards, we can search all over through the maze of small tunnels and rocky chambers, but still only find one possible way forward: a single bombable block dropping through a hole on top of another bombable block, and ultimately into the same side of the cave we could have accessed from the other hidden opening. No matter how we do it, we reach a blue door at the end. Maybe it's just me, but this huge convoluted maze of a room with absolutely no pickups to encourage our exploration feels uncomfortable. And this is after 2 other large rooms with no items to speak of. The only reward here is in knowing that we are gaining new ground, leaving the wrecked ship in our wake. In the next cramped room, we drop a power bomb to open the yellow door on the floor, which the surrounding metal piping nearby alludes to this door leading us to yet another elevator. And it certainly does. We've sunken deep below a rocky lake and uncovered yet another way to descend even deeper. With the ghosts of our past haunting our thoughts, we leave the wrecked ship behind us. We can't waste time grieving our fallen ancestors. Instead, we must fight on, not just for their sake, but for the fates of everyone else alive who might fall victim to the space pirates' vicious conquest. As our elevator touches down, we put our past behind us to focus our efforts, clear our mind, and embrace the mysterious depths of Meridia. Thank you so much for making it to the end of Chapter 5 of the Super Metroid experience. I apologize, this one took a little bit longer than I expected to get finished. The holidays went by, my daughter's birthday, we've been very busy, and I wanted to make sure that this episode was done as well as I could actually make it, because the wrecked ship, though it's small, is such an interesting place, and so many things come to light here, and I wanted to make sure I told this story properly. The next part also intimidates me a lot. Meridia is gargantuan, but the wrecked ship I never expected to take an hour to tell its story. When we get to Meridia, I'm probably going to tell it more linear, so we're on track, and hopefully it doesn't take nearly as long as this chapter did. I'm sorry once again for the wait. There is one last thing I would like to clear up to add an addendum to the last chapter where we talked about reserve tanks. When you have a reserve tank and you spend it and you want to heal it or fill it back up again, you are actually able to fill it up with enemy drops, and you are not able to do it with an energy recharge station, even though the reverse you would expect to be true, and that is what I said in the video. So apologies for the confusion. I will likely try to fix this when I eventually compile the entire Super Metroid experience into one giant video / episode podcast, but that will be for another day. But it was a minor enough thing, I figure I will just tell you later when I realized I made a mistake. I mean, I'm doing a tremendous amount of research and learning so much about this game, but even still, there's more things that I just uncover every day and learn about it. Thank you for learning along with me. Remember to like the videos and subscribe for more, and I will see you all in the next chapter of the Super Metroid experience.